Well, good afternoon or morning, wherever you're at today. I know we got some people on the West Coast. Thanks for joining us for the 25th episode of our weekly financial roundtable with light bulb moments. And we're glad you joined us. Remember, money is not the most important thing in life, but is like oxygen on the gotta have it scale. I'm Tom Kuhn from Qnity. We're here to help people not only make great money, but to do what they love and have a great quality of life. We have introduced our Money by Qnity course, Financial Success Training, and embedded in that is a methodology that helps to go what's complicated, overwhelming, and confusing into a clearer and simpler path towards prosperity, using an approach that's about making things simple, visual, and actionable as it relates to financial literacy for students and in all our other offerings. To prosper, manage your ATM, your attention, time, and money. And it's not lost on us and me that this is your precious time. So I want to thank you for joining us today. And thank you for tuning in each week, whether you're tuning in live or listening to the YouTube recording. We're glad you're with us. We hope you have some light bulb moments today, and maybe you connect some new dots that will help you and your school towards an even better and more prosperous future as we come into 2022. Our last guest was John Harms. It was very much centered on technology. And this week's guest, we have Gordon Miller, the CEO of Hairbrained, who just has a wealth of information for us. So I'm so glad to have Gordon with us today. Gordon and I were together 2 hours ago, and we just had an amazing session with salons and spas. So we're anxious to bring this to the school audience. Past recordings of the roundtable are on YouTube. Several of you have mentioned that you've gone to the YouTube and watched the videos. In certain cases, watched an episode more than once, which is great. A shout out to our sponsors, starting, of course, with Pivot Point, our partners in crime in offering the Money by Qnity course, which is financial literacy training for forward-thinking schools. Our curriculum is rich, comprehensive, but also is very much directed to the hearts and minds of today's student and today's audience and what they're looking for. So simple, visual, and actionable is really the DNA in these modules that cover the things that are necessary to help match students' art and heart with money skills that will allow them to have the kind of future that we all want and hope for them. We hope you become a money school. Our website is qnityforschools.com. And that's where you would go to book a demo. Feel free to book a demo to learn a little bit more about the course. Also, shout out to Lightheart Sanders, the CPAs. They work with over 100 schools, and they've been great participants in this roundtable. And I'm thrilled to have them as a sponsor as they do things such as benchmark with other schools. Again, we hope you have some light bulb moments today. We do include a 9-grid in this, in your invite. The 9-grid is one of our visual thinking tools to use as a mind map, storyboard, or visual step-by-step. And some of you can absolutely use that to record your light bulb moments. I'm going to start out with just a few tips as we enter the new year. And when we're in this mindset of a fresh start, and a few different things to maybe inspire you and to give you some suggestions. First of all, a great time to celebrate your GNAs, your gratitudes and accomplishments. Me personally, I like to journal every single morning, not only what I'm grateful for, but what I accomplished in the previous day. And at year end, it really filled me personally to spend some time and to really go through. And before we entered into a new year, to really spend some time doing that. Now, we have a methodology around that. And it's very simple. It's to really break these gratitudes and accomplishments into something we call the 5 L's. If you've gone through our money course, you might be familiar with our life map, which breaks down a life into 5 different key areas: professional, relational, spiritual, physical, and financial. And that's exactly what I did, is I celebrated and acknowledged to me personally all of these different areas. Now, let's talk about maybe how you can use this with your team. One of the things that we promote is do a 9-grid closure activity with your team. And if you're not practitioners in the Qnity system, it's quite simple. You just simply put in the center box of a 9-grid where you want to get closure. or where you got closure from the previous year. It's a great way to really mark the end to the past and allow you to become more present into the future. So a 9-grid closure activity is something that's awesome, whether you do it with your entire team, whether you do it with your students, whether you do it for yourself personally. It's a great activity to do this time of year. And the other thing is, if you are having a meeting with your team, your leadership team, your entire faculty, the school team, answer 4 questions. And this is the basis of any great summit and any great leadership message. And the 4 questions are: where are we? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? And what does that mean to each and every one of you? Where are we? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? And what does that mean to each and every one of you? Many times leaders have approached a summit and they were trying to organize their thoughts for a State of the Union. And this is just a great, very simple format to use. All right, let's have Gordon come off mute, and let's see you, Gordon. Gordon has you got an amazing background, Gordon. You're actually an alumni of Pivot Point, and you worked at several other areas in the school industry. And right now you are Hairbrained CEO, and you're the Hairbrained Conversation podcast host. How are you, Gordon?
I'm good. I'm looking at people's names and I'm like having a moment because I know way too many people on the list. And you mentioned my alumni status is Pivot Point corporate. I'm not a hairdresser, but hey, to all my Pivot Point friends, a special shout out to Janet Fisher, but to everybody, you know who you are. I love you guys. This was a surprise.
Gordon, when I was, the basis of our time today will be a summary version of a great presentation you did at the PBA Executive Summit in mid-November, where you presented findings from a PBA study. And give you a shout out, you joined Hairbrained, how many was it, 5-6 years ago, did you say?
4.5.
4.5. So I saw your partners at the cocktail reception, 2 great guys, and Gerard and Randy. And they were effusive in the praise of you and the difference that you've made when you came into Hairbrained. And it's nice to know that, usually there's a honeymoon, but the honeymoon is continued. So they have.
Did they have cocktails? Were they perchance partaking?
Not saying.
No, I love the guys, and I feel really honored to have the job that I have every day.
We'll get a chance at the end to talk a little bit about Hairbrained, but what we're going to do today is we're going to do a very abbreviated version of some of your insights that you offered based upon the PBA study. And there's a couple of your slides here. Never let a good crisis go to waste. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. Great quote. And what you did is I sat in your presentation. It was a good hour. It was a keynote, and I had so many darn pictures of your slides. And in fact, my photo library is starting to get blowing up. I got so many of them. But what you did is you asked some provocative questions, and they were framed in ask yourself ... Now I'm pulling them up on the screen. By the way, this is a 9-grid. So this is pulled out of a presentation. How many slides was your presentation? Probably 100 or something like that.
About 70.
70. And so we're not going to go through all these questions today, but this would be the basis that we're going to talk about. And I'm going to get the one, this is a financial roundtable, and we'll start with this one, okay? And by the way, again, I want to thank you, and you did double dip today. You were my guest earlier today, and many people said they loved it. So thanks again for joining us. So you asked the question, ask yourself, how do we inspire a math-orientated mindset as a foundation for long-term success? Take that one away, if you would.
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking as you were talking earlier about what you're doing in the school world, which I am most excited about. And I've talked to you about that before. I think it's really important and special. So I think back, it's funny, I was working running a small chain of schools in Utah. I got the job when I was 27. I'd been in Denver, learning the school business, and I was 27. I didn't know much of anything, but I fell into the right spot. And And the guy who bought 11 schools bought them for his wife's, for their anniversary. She was a hairdresser who always wanted to own a beauty school, but he could only find 11. So he bought 11. And then he hired some kid to run them because he didn't know what else to do. And I happened to be that kid. One of the very first things I did when I got there was look at the kit and the books and everything and look at from a competitive perspective how we're going to market ourselves. But the very first decision I made was to seek out something about math, because I was in this position to do things that I wasn't in my former job, but I always wondered, like, it doesn't seem like the folks I'm around, the beauty school students, understand math, and yet I keep hearing all these math things. Like, so why aren't we teaching them math? And that was my first act, was to add the Math of Cosmetology by Milady Publishing back in 1980, I don't know, 84. So, and now here we are today. And little has changed, I would argue, on this topic. You know, and I say that judging what I know about professionals today, more so than schools. And so we still have a big job to do. And I'm excited what you're doing. And to me, again, I think the mindset of success in this industry begins in school. You know, I think we have such an opportunity to fill these young and sometimes older, students, with just the core principles that we've all learned that it takes to succeed. And that often is layered upon all the mandatory things that a school, of course, must teach for licensure. But we have so many opportunities to influence, the minds of young people in positive ways and prepare them for what's coming. And I think coming out of COVID, I hope we all realize that the preparation, that the opportunities are more diverse than ever, definitely more, moving into independence, but that's been going on for decades. And I think the roles and what's important, for schools to consider has shifted a little bit. I think the core is very much the core, but there's been some shifts, and I think math moves almost to the top of the list.
I recall. I didn't mention this on our last roundtable, but we've seen multiple studies that show at least 50% of Americans struggle with math, or have math anxiety. I remember the first time I read it was in the Parade magazine, a Sunday newspaper.
Oh, you're showing your age.
and which of course we no longer subscribe to, but it was in like Parade magazine. Do you realize how many people suffer from math anxiety? So now I want to backtrack a little bit, because let's give a little bit of context for our listeners today on this study. So it was performed by the Professional Beauty Association. Yep. And so give just a little background for our group before we get to some of the other findings.
It's an annual study, state of the industry. I believe they did not do it in 2020. It was conducted in September of 2021. It went out to about 24,000 members of the association, which is a subset of the larger population. I think it's a couple 100,000 members now. And then out of that, they called the results. It was statistically valid. It was done by a third-party company that does all their research. And then I was asked to take the key findings that they had prepared in a deck and present them. And they were kind enough, maybe didn't know what to expect, to allow me to offer my own thoughts on each of those. I always love doing so. That was fun.
So let's get to some of the things that are in your study. And let's talk about online learning for a moment. And the question you asked was, you said, ask yourself, ... how can we lead the industry to a better future by leveraging online learning? What do you online learning? What do you mean by that? And what are maybe some of the numbers that came out of the study, if you have them in your head there?
Yeah. So very importantly, myself and a number of people in your chat room have been asking this question for as long as I can remember, because my most important mentor and one of my dearest friends in life was Leo Passage, the late Leo Passage, Robert's dad. He was asking this question when I started at Pivot Point in 1986. Seriously, he was that enamored with technology. And of course, it was a different time and technology was different, but there's been lots of folks saying, how can we be better at what we do in the school world, in teaching? by taking advantage of all the stuff that's around us. Now, big picture, this question is about the entire industry. And I think, many of us, especially who spent time in the school world, we kind of look at learning as a continuum, from the day school begins and what does it look like throughout an entire career. And hopefully we inspire students as they graduate to know that learning must continue. It must continue. And technology, we've learned over time kind of breaks down the barriers. One of the things that survey showed was that in the past, pre-pandemic, that 28% were not getting any education during a normal year in terms of real-time classes. And it was similar with digital. So about a quarter of the industry, the survey showed, just were not getting the education that we would hope they would get. And this was a better audience than most because these are PBA members. So I think the percentage is actually higher. So this idea, and we don't talk enough about why that is, geographic barriers, economic barriers, work barriers, brand relationship or lack of relationship barriers. So how, what can we do, to give access to more people? We saw during pandemic, many of us have known this for years, if not decades, but the pandemic brought the walls down. It forced us into taking advantage of these amazing technologies. And the publishing companies stepped up in a huge way. That was so exciting to see. Didn't expect anything different from Pivot Point. And I think they have, the length of this has sucked, the pandemic, but the length has also allowed a lot of things to be proven. And I think in a lot of habits to be, kind of put in place that will stay in place. And I think in the education space in particular, I'm excited about those kind of things. In the salon, sometimes we worry that the habits are going the wrong ways because the world's been upside down. But I just think the opening up of any and all opportunities to push digital out in a bigger way, starting at the schools, and then with that opportunity to do it right as a student in the school, I would hope that those walls would stay down. And as brands especially start pumping out high quality education, the industry can fundamentally be changed. I mean, I really, truly believe that, because I believe that whatever limitations this industry has are because people just don't know enough, haven't learned enough, fast enough to stay ahead of their goals. We lose so many people because they just don't get to where they thought they were going to get in time. And, life happens. So I think digital learning will fundamentally change this industry, within the next 5 to 10 years.
Related to this, and another one of your ask yourself questions was, how can we better educate professionals on the power of technology to transform careers, businesses, and lives? And you shared some statistics about technology integration or adoption. For example, only 46% offer online booking, and there's other technology. So let's talk about that, technology adoption and your question.
Well, again, if you look at the survey, it's skewed. One thing I didn't say was that 73% of the respondents had been in the industry 10 years or longer. So it's an older demographic that responded to the survey. So which, makes you think they're not as close to technology as perhaps, younger people would be. So that might be skewed a little bit, but all the tech companies have long said about half the industry is really actively involved in this. So a lot of things to consider, but it starts with, before you got here to the industry, what was your opinion, experience, connection to anything and everything technology? Gen Z are digital natives. They grew up with this stuff. The kids who are now in their 20s are the ones some of us remember in the iPad commercials, who were trying to do this with a newspaper, and so they've had this technology. So the great news is they're primed for it. Now the question is, how do we as a larger industry make it clear to them that these tools are there, make it clear to them these tools will make things better, more efficient. If being successful in this industry is about taking care of guests, like how do we create efficiency so we have more time to do that? Well, technology, goes right to the front of the line. So I think generationally, that's going to be key. And since we have a school audience, I think, what I would say to them is any and every opportunity to reinforce the use of and the value of technology is critical. I know, some schools have connected with Tipsy, for example. I know some schools, have active online booking, and the more schools, as they always, I think, have strived to do, the more they emulate salons in as many ways as they can while remaining schools. and do it in a really progressive and modern way. I think that begins to close this gap that we have between the greater, thoughts about technology and what the industry is actually doing with it.
That's mirroring, having schools mirror salons leads me to one of your statistics that were not one of your, one of the statistics from the study, and that is 26% offer virtual consultations. And I think what you said in the last roundtable was that's overstated. It's a lot less than that. So,
well, what I said was I don't question necessarily whether they're being offered. I question whether or not they're happening. So I think during pandemic, when everything was shut down, it was such a natural, easy thing to slide into, and it was really exciting to hear the feedback. What I have not, as of late, been able to find anybody who was doing it, who still is doing it, mostly because clients aren't asking for it. They can come in. So it's interesting on the slide because we see it on the big screen and they go, yeah, the industry is moving in the right direction with technology. But I would argue that I don't believe it's a thing of significance in the industry today. We'll see where it takes us.
Do you think it should be? How do you feel about digital consultations?
I'm not the hairdresser, but I've had a couple friends who participated in them. I've talked to lots of hairdressers. So I think, have you had a medical digital consultation? Because I have. And so the nice part about it was, it was a kind of an annual thing, so I had to go get my blood work and everything, but I didn't have to, it was highly efficient. So I love that part of it, highly, highly efficient. And the technical stuff, they sent me to, where I had to go to get it. So I think the efficiencies is the key, and depending on who your clients are, it may or may not make a difference. And so, it's the more things that we can offer, to client that some clients will use, enough clients will use to maintain it, the better. But I think the jury's out on this one still. And there's such a personal relationship. I don't think you could convince me. I'm a bad example, but I don't think you can convince me to do anything radically different. No one's ever convinced me to do much radically different with this, but I don't think digital would do that. You'd have to be like right up there with me, looking in my eyes, and maybe even get a tear in your eye as you tried to convince me to get rid of my gray hair. Maybe I would react. But I just think there's something about that personal in-person exchange that's so powerful. And I know we all can't wait to get back to it. So I don't know, but I do think that the bigger idea of technology is critical for this industry to wrap its arms around it as many ways as we possibly can, because consumers is what so many of us do now, is we expect it. And why would salons not offer to us what we're used to getting in a visit to 7-Eleven as far as how I check out? I mean, it's like, we can be better than that, so whatever.
You asked another one. This is a provocative question. Ask yourself, how do we inspire more to have a business owner mindset in an industry dominated by self-employment?
Yeah, this is a critical one. I mean, I've been talking about this actually. So, for my entire career, one of the bigger conversations to prospective students on behalf of the whole industry, I was part of it too, was this is an industry where you can one day be your own boss. You one day can own your own salon. You can be. It was one of those fundamental kind of baseline things that got talked about with someone who's thinking about coming into the industry. It just was part of it. And so to me, that's an encouragement. And in today's world, the reality of being in business for yourself, the walls have come down. And you want to be in business for yourself in the beauty industry, you can. It used to be that was more true regionally, Southwest as an example. Of course, anybody could open a salon if you had the resources, but the barriers to entry for rental were extremely low. So as the industry becomes, many believe the majority of the industry now, in terms of the workers, is rental. And if that's true, as schools, many have probably already made the adaptations, but you have got to change something about what you're doing with young people coming in, if there's a really good chance that they're going to be self-employed soon after walking out your doors upon graduation. It's a different mindset. It's a different, and very interesting. I haven't done this in quite a few years now, but I would say 7-8 years ago, I did an analysis kind of going through states to figure out licenses per capita in each state. I want to do it again because what was interesting back then is the highest number of licenses per capita were Texas and California, which coincidentally are the highest rates of rental in the entire country. And as soon as you moved away from that and got to states that have very little rental, the ratio was much different. So what it says to me on the surface without any supporting data is that higher turnover where you have more rental makes sense. Lack of support, you're on your own. So you could see that. But that also means that we're working twice as hard, perhaps, maybe even more than twice as hard, to bring more people into the industry because we're losing them faster than we're losing them in states where they are predominantly commission. And to me, from the school industry, that's just a gift. That's just, it is what it is. And so therefore, as educators, what do we have to shift? I mean, because there's a challenge that our students, if I'm in one of those states, faces that someone in New Jersey doesn't face, because in New Jersey, rental is for some very strange reason outlawed.
You gave a few questions or a couple questions that you would ask someone if they're independent. We call them a solopreneur. And I think they're very provocative questions. What are the two questions or a couple of them that you ask?
It's basically almost always the same two. And I get a lot of calls from young folks or reach out to DMs and I'm thinking about doing this, especially in the beginning of the pandemic. Any advice, any thoughts? And the two questions are, first and foremost, what percentage of the clientele that you take care of every week or every month are walk-ins? And that's usually they stop in their tracks. And if they're in a traditional commission salon, there's usually some walk-ins and 10%, 15%, 20%, and most of them are in that 15 to 25% range, I would say, in these questions. And it just stops them in their tracks because I said, you won't have walk-ins. Are you ready to replace those clients? And by the way, the majority of your clients aren't going to follow you. I hope you know that too. And how far are you moving? Have you kind of figured this all out? So I think, that is a really critical one. And the second one is, what time do you go to work in your current position? It's like, 10 a.m. And I'm like, okay, so are you that self-disciplined person who no longer has a boss except for yourself, who is able to show up for yourself on time every day and put in the time? And, because it's going to be harder, not easier. And so, but it's a wonderful life if you're the person who can fit into that entrepreneurial life. So.
Entrepreneurship is a subject very near and dear to me and our curriculum. We actually have a whole module that really addresses what we call preneurship and distinguishes between a solopreneur, entrepreneur, and intrapreneur. And as someone that's been an advisor, the first, 15 years of my career, I worked with creative entrepreneurs. I'll give you the definition of an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is someone that still wants to be an entrepreneur after I try to talk them out of it.
It's a good one.
Because having been on the other side, seeing many people by the way, I'm a big fan of entrepreneurship. Of course, I am an entrepreneur, but I've also been part of disasters and major life challenges for people not really understanding what it means to be an entrepreneur. So I have a little bit of a bias. I believe that people should start their career out in a way. There's going to be the 10% of just 10% of people that are very wired right out of the gate to go off on their own, but they're pretty rare. Anyway, that's me having my own commentary, and this isn't about me, it's about you. Let me get to the next question, okay?
Let me add there, though. I think it's
please.
important to say, because I think, the true entrepreneur is a rare being. And
it is.
Some people will say to me, it's like, oh, I'm like, I look at my career so when I look at myself as a business person in my career, I would say my greatest strength has always been number two. Leo Passage, and the Passage family stood ahead of me in my 10 years at Pivot Point, and I at many times I felt very much to be his right arm. He had other right arms as well, but I loved being in support. And I had a very public role. At Milady Publishing, I was president, but I had a boss above me because I had a parent company who I thought was a genius. And I loved working for her as well as American. I can go through all my jobs, and I think so. Yes, entrepreneurship is great, but a great team and a great leader who lets you lead in the way that you need to lead and you're part of the work, there's just nothing better as far as I'm concerned. And, again, I feel similar in my work at Hairbrained. My role is CEO and I run the business, but I always am pushing those guys out on stage ahead of me.
Well, intrapreneurship is if you Google the word, you'll see one hit out of 300 for entrepreneurship. And there is something called entrepreneurial poverty. Many entrepreneurs live in poverty, and whether it's poverty by our definition of, quality of life, earnings, whatever. And that's why many salon owners don't earn less than, key employees. All right, let's, I like this one because I like all of your questions and how you interpreted the research. And it has to do with confidence and raising prices. And so you say, how do we give owners and professionals the confidence to raise prices annually? Now, this is a school audience, but getting students prepared to understand that confidence is important, and they will be at points in their career where they're going to have to get through the fear of raising their prices. So let's get to that for a few minutes here.
Well, and it's a topic I think that can be really, I think, presented to young people broadly, because there's a number of issues to consider when it comes to confidence. I think for a student, the first place is standing behind a chair in a salon clinic doing hair, and it's being paid for. So there's already a connection to the money. And somebody else had to ask for it, but of course, in schools, you're encouraging your students how to upsell. So already, students are beginning to understand and think about money, and so much of their confidence or lack of confidence comes from that experience. And the more students can be put in a position to talk price, to talk money, to have an understanding, of course, of retail, and I know better schools are participating in that. So there's a lot of opportunity for the student to have some experiences. The question is the support system around that student such that will give them confidence? Are we able as a school to pay attention to what's happening in this particular area and see where the chinks in the armor are individually or collectively for our student body, and help them, and help them. And then of course, when people go out in the world, it's hopefully they leave school with that confidence to trust their employer and who has to lead a business, and those prices might be determined by somebody else, and that might make me feel insecure or frustrated. And so there's that whole learning of being part of a team, and also figuring out how to deal with that which I don't have control over, yet is a really big and important part of my career and my life. And I think so those we often hear of people who work on a team who lose their mojo on the team just because they're frustrated about price increases. What my clients are going to, Mrs. Jones was upset. Okay, fine. Mrs. Jones is one of 200. How'd the other 199 feel? But we react emotionally. So, I think, when students get out, they should, before they get out, have an understanding of pricing contextually in a entrepreneurial business where you are the entrepreneur versus where you are part of a team, and what that might mean. And I think especially today, coming through pandemic, this giant talk the country's been having about inflation, opens up such a great door of conversation in schools, because inflation is the problem that salons have always had, that price increases help deal with. And how you manage your price increases or not affects whether the long haul works for you, career or team wise or business wise. And so if we only could get students, because if we only got them to understand inflation and what it means to them as human beings, I think it would be a game-changing moment. Because so many people over the years I've talked about price increase, my reaction is always the same when they struggle. I'm like, well, just tell me something in your life the last year or two that hasn't gone up in price. And if everything's the same, then you're cool. But if gas has gone up, if milk has gone up, if the water bill has gone up, if the cost of your hair color has gone up, you better be making some adjustments. And let's talk about what that means and how you're going to do it.
We shared something, I think it was maybe 6 weeks ago, that showed price of haircuts and how much they've gone on with this long list of like gas and food and so on and so forth. And haircuts were like near the bottom of the list in terms of how much they went up in price.
Yeah.
This next question it's embedded in something I already asked you, but is this a part-time industry? And one of the findings from the study was 60% work under 32 hours. Is this a part-time industry?
I mean, technically, it looks like it has become one, and there's good and bad in that. We can talk about, one thing we've always talked about is how powerful this industry has been for professional women and the opportunities it has given them, and people who want to have families generally, all kinds of people, and so that often leads to a full-time career that is adjusted over time, and so those numbers tend to slide. But I think what we've also seen as rental has grown and more people have become their own bosses, and I know many of them personally, we've seen the time that they dedicate towards their career shrinking because they have the ability to make that decision. We also have, some big corporate entities that have come into the industry that employ many, many people. And because of labor laws in states and federally, they often will not give people full-time schedules because they don't want to pay the benefits. And that's not calling anybody else specifically, but that is part of corporate America. You read articles about big companies like Walmart, they often have caps on how many people to give a full-time schedule to avoid all the extra benefit costs that they would have. So, but yes, I believe we're becoming more and more part-time. And I will go back to the price increase question, because I think something relative to what you said, Tom, about looking at categories of commerce, if you will, the things that people pay for, including haircuts, and looking at us towards the bottom of the list, that can only mean that pay in our industry has similarly flatlined because they go together. They go up together. Prices go up, pay goes up. Prices stay stagnant, you stay stagnant. And then if we look at the fact that we are concerned with people leaving the industry sometimes for financial reasons, I think you could say, look, if Tom had a magic wand, he could put industry-wide price increases across, every single year as appropriate. I believe that we would lose less people in our industry. But too many people in our industry don't have the confidence or the wherewithal, or work for people who don't have the confidence or wherewithal to keep prices in line with inflation, or have been out of whack for so long they can't even catch up, and they're in this cycle of hiring and losing people because of financial reasons and not even understanding what's happening to their business.
When we were doing live seminars, I used to ask the question, working with members of the team, how many of you struggle with self-confidence, and ask them to raise their hands. And usually the masters were the ones that raised their hands first. And masters often find that they reach a ceiling and get very scared about raising their prices and feel like they've created the ceiling. All right, I got one more ask yourself. And then I know you have been very generous with your time today. I've got a little bit of stuff at the end about you that I want to share. But my final ask yourself question is, how can we seize the many pandemic-driven opportunities for significant industry-wide change? It's a big one.
It is a big one. And because we're talking with schools, when I think about, first off, the schools have always, I think, faced more hurdles and challenges in most parts of the industry because it's so highly regulated. So it just brings a whole other set of stuff, to the party. And so I'm going to kind of stick it in that lane for a moment. And I have, I lived the first 25 years of my career completely in the school part of the industry, and the last part, definitely on the salon side, a little bit of crossover, being in media. Listening to salons forever, it's been like, the schools that teach for state board sucks, so that's the explanation for whatever challenges they have with new hires. State board. And then schools, if somebody was on that side, I was like, it's so much more complicated than that. It's like, don't throw that particular rock, because there's a much deeper conversation that has to go on. And from the school side, it was always like, well, what's the responsibility of a salon to onboard somebody? What are salons doing? Again, when I think of the corporations I've worked with that are not salons, big companies that are media companies and others, they had people inside trying to figure out, like, how do we keep our staff? Like, how do we train our staff? Like, how do we keep people learning all the time? Because we wanted to be here for a very long time. And I think, that this conversation between salons and schools has been going on forever, and nothing much has changed. And my own observation is that we have this kind of weird chasm that exists between school and work. And it's a dangerous place for young people. And it's a dangerous place for me as a four-year college graduate. Like I had a degree in finance and I was done. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I looked in the newspaper and got a part-time job at a chain of beauty schools and salons. That was not meant to be my life. And if my college counselor saw it, I'd probably go, oh my, what happened? You know, it ended up working out really well for me, you know, but again, it could have gone sideways. And so I believe, relevant to this group of people, you know, I hope to begin to hear more conversations about what does the industry do for young people in this in-between place to empower as many people as we possibly can, especially, and this is a point the fingers at the salon kind of moment, but over the last, 3, 4, or 5 years, apprenticeships have almost disappeared, relative to the math. Assistantships have gone down, down, down. And during pandemic, for the first time in a long time, I've seen a very large shift in people who are looking to hire people with a following, with a book. And there were years of conversation of that's bad. You don't do that. You don't try to steal. You don't get a staff member from a local salon. And that's just, and people have always done it, but there was a big chunk of the industry who did not. And I've seen some very heavy hitter, very famous, very well-respected salon owners who say out loud, on Instagram, I've never done this before, but we're taking people with a following. And so take all that together. It says to me that this in-between time between school and work, or maybe that first year or so, knowing that students are leaving schools that are educational environments, going into work environments that may not have any educational support that's been programmed or really put together specifically for an individual or can be tailored to, that scares the crap out of me. But it also speaks to a massive opportunity for something good to happen in the industry if the larger institutions can wrap our arms around it.
One of your conclusions to the study and your frame was that we're in a pretty good place, and that the study it all depends on how you interpret things, but it paints a relatively positive picture for the future. Do you feel that is the case?
Well, every day we wake up and have to check out the news, and we don't know what the heck's going on from day to day, but. The best sign of all is, we work with 20 of the biggest brands in the industry here at Hairbrained. There are corporate supporters. We work with them on an annual basis. We do all kinds of work with them. I've not spoken to a brand, as of late, who didn't look at this last year as a record year, if perhaps the best year ever in many of the companies. Brands don't have great years unless salons are having great years. In our conversation, we talk to salons and stylists every single day at Hairbrained, and it's, again, record new clients. Like I just don't hear much about bad other than emotional bad. We're all struggling, in many, many ways, but no, the business feels really, really good. I think all the markers are headed in the right direction. I think the areas of challenge for the industry, if you want to simplify it, are simply, the education space on the professional side in particular has a lot of challenges ahead as people try to sort out digital, and the events space is I think headed for some significant change and definitely some more obstacles. The rest of the industry feels like it's going to settle back into some sort of new normal. And with a little bit of luck, we will just continue to grow in positive ways.
Gordon, you are an amazing guest. Michelle from our team gave you major shout outs between sessions, and she loved Gordon. I said, well, of course, we all love Gordon.
Oh, thanks.
It's
mutual.
I would love for you to give an unapologetic promotion of Hairbrained and what you do. You didn't ask for it, but as a gracious guest, tell us about Hairbrained. Tell us about how people can follow, get involved with Hairbrained and all of that.
So Hairbrained is, so thank you for that, Tom. Thanks for having me, and thanks to the Qnity team. Again, we think the world of you guys and have for a long time, and are most excited about the great work you all have been doing these last 18, 20 months or so. Game-changing stuff. So Hairbrained is a community, a digital, online, and real-time community that was founded by two really serious, what we call craft hairdressers, Gerard Scarpesi and Randy Taylor. You referenced them earlier. I was a fan of them almost from the get-go. Actually, I mentioned Leo Passage earlier. I remember so clearly the day I sat in his office with him saying, look at what these guys are doing. Hairbrained 10 years ago, and 11, 12 years ago, maybe. It blew my mind, and I got drawn into it and just continued my career, and over time got to know the guys, encouraged them to keep doing what they were doing. And 4 years ago, when I made a decision to leave American Salon, they offered me the opportunity to join them. Hairbrained remains very much a community. Brands view us as a media platform, but we are just coming up on 2 million followers across all of our digital platforms and social media platforms. We are at our core dedicated to education. We have an education platform called HB Live. HB is in Hairbrained, LIVE.me, not .com. And it's the Hairbrained Digital Academy. We have over 12,000 students in it. We've been at it for 3 years. We put out 3 new courses every single month. We have a subscription program that has been growing leaps and bounds, and education is what we care most about, and quality everything. And we have a tool shop called Hairbrained.pro where we sell some of the finest tools you'll find anywhere. Gerard's really passionate about quality stuff. He doesn't want hairdressers to have anything but the best, and we sell the best, but we sell them at really great prices. And
you have an event going on.
We have an event coming. Thank you.
March 12th. I hope the gods of whatever allow that to continue. So talk about that a moment, then I'm going to let you go because I know you got another meeting.
Yeah, that's the Hairbrained Video Awards. It's Hairbrained Video Award number 8. We get together in real time every year. We missed it in 2020. In fact, I believe we were the first event in the industry to cancel because of COVID. 2021 we didn't have, I should say. 2020 we did have. I was in New York for IBS as they were shutting down Javits Center for COVID, and our event was that evening. And based on community feedback, we went ahead and did it. And thank God it was not a spreader event. But we are doing it again March 12th or 13th. It's a Sunday. In New York City. We will recognize the winners of what we believe are some of the finest videos that have been crafted over the last 2 years. And we invite people to be there, and fingers crossed. We're feeling very optimistic, and we will remain that way. We hope all the way through that evening. Thank you for having us, Tom.
Gordon, thanks for having us. Let's everybody give Gordon a virtual round of applause. I have already awarded you the $1 million light bulb and a membership into the Brain Trust, Gordon. So this will be forthcoming to you.
Thank you.
Great information, great guest. Feel free to exit stage left. I know that you're going on another call, so thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Okay? And let me say before I go, because it is a small group, to Joe Cairo, hi to the Cairo family. Again, there's so many pivot point people. I'd mention all the names, but they know again. So bye, everybody. It feels like old home week. Thank you so much. All
right. Good to have you, Gordon. All right, guys, let's see what we have to wrap things up here. We are having an event. We're going to celebrate members of the Brain Trust on Sunday, May 15th. It is going to be in Scottsdale. It's going to be a celebration of light bulb moments, and we're going to invite all of our guests and members of the Roundtable to join us. It will be a very special Beauty Changes Lives event. So that is coming up. A little bit more about that as we get into the future. We will be presenting the Golden Light Bulb Awards for some of the best insights that have come from these roundtables. It's going to be part of an event that's called the Fill. It's an opportunity to fill your bucket and fill the gaps in your business. We hope you had some light bulb moments today, certainly with Gordon and some of his perspective and his interpretation of the PBA research. I find to help create a great clarity for many of us. If you are not already a money school, please book a demo. You can go to qnityforschools.com and you can have an opportunity to experience what the curriculum looks like so that you can really help students have the kind of money skills that match their heart and heart as they join this beautiful industry. Closing thoughts: a mind stretched never returns to its original form. Certainly the opportunity to learn like this together and have great guests stretch our minds. I hope it stretched your mind today, and we will see you next week. We have a great guest next week, of course. And meanwhile, we wish all of you a highly prosperous and successful 2022. Thanks for spending your attention and time with us today. And we'll leave it at that. We'll see you next week. Thanks again. Bye now.